Hi, welcome to section 5. In this section we are going to talk about testing. Testing is never the most popular subject in web development. However, it's a very important one. Throughout this section, we're going to try to tackle this subject in the most practical and fun way as possible. First, we're going to talk about how to set up our testing engine, which is called Jest. Then, we're going to move forward into talking about one specific type of test, which are snapshot tests. In our third video, we're going to talk about how to mock up assets using Jest, in particular images. And at the end, we're going to see how to use another tool called Enzyme for more complex testing scenarios. So let's start talking about Jest. In this video, we're going to install and set up Jest and create a text script in our package.json file. Jest is a JavaScript testing engine. It's fast and sandboxed and has become in these past years the standard when working with React. It's easy to configure, has built-in coverage reports, and have this very awesome feature called snapshot testing support. Additionally, it automatically integrates with Babel, so we can use our exe syntax totally out of the box. Before jumping to our code editor, let's discuss a little bit the Jest API. The describe function creates a block that groups together several related tests. I typically create one file per component and wrap that file with a describe function. What I'm saying there is that all the tests that are going to be inside the describe function are related to the same component. Then we have the test function, of course, also called it, that defines a new test to be run. This is the most important function in the Jest API. A test function doesn't need to be inside a describe, but I think it's usually good practice to wrap several tests inside a describe call. The take function takes a string, which will be the test name, and a function as a second parameter, which will have our test inside. Additionally, there are some callback functions that can be configured using Jest to be called in certain moments of the text execution. The most important are before each, before all, after each, and after all. I usually just use before each, which I typically use to initialize some variables or components. And that's pretty much all you have to know about Jest to start working with it. So now we can go to our terminal and install Jest. To install it, just type yarn add Jest and remember to install it as a development dependency. In the meantime, we can go to our project and create a new folder inside our source directory. This folder is going to be called specs. This is typically the name I use for the folder in which I will put the test, but you can choose whatever you want. By default, Jest creates a folder called __ test, but I usually like to define my own. Now that Jest has installed correctly, let's create a new file to configure Jest. And this can be done in the same way we set up all the other tools that we are using in the project. Just create a new file and call it jest.config.js. Inside the file, we're going to export a new JavaScript object. The most important thing that we have to define is to tell Jest where to find the test files. And for that, we use the text regex property. And in this case, we're going to set up his value with this particular regex. This regex is telling Jest to find the test files inside the source folder and to match every JS file that ends up with spec.js. Okay? Additionally, it's usually good practice to tell Jest which folder he should ignore, which are typically the node modules folder. We don't want to run tests inside that folder, and in our case, the dist folder. Now we are in a position to start creating some tests. So go to your source folder and create a new file called test_spec.js. Inside this file, create a describe block and call it test. And inside the describe block, let's create a new test called also test, just temporarily. Inside the test, let's just add a comment and save the file. If we look to the warnings, ESLint is telling us that test and describe are not defined. This can be easily fixed by adding an ESLint plugin. So go to your terminal and install ESLint plugin Jest, always as a dev dependency. Now go back to your code editor and edit the ESLint JSON file. Let's set up the new plugin and also a new end key. Now, if we go back to our test file, we will see that these warnings are gone. Finally, let's create an npm script to run our test. So go to your package.json and create a new script called tests. This script is going to call the Jest binary from inside our node modules. When running this script, Jest automatically identify the Jest config file and apply the configuration that you passed in there. So let's try it. Now we can see that Jest identified our test spec file and that he ran one test inside of it. Since that test doesn't have any content, Jest tells us that that test ran successfully. Cool. Now that you install and set up Jest, we can now create real test files.